Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. So I finished all of the 1.4 content for Zenless when it comes to main story. I've done the post story, the post main story. I've done some of the new endgame mode. There's another new endgame mode that I think that's coming out in 2 weeks, but that's not out yet. So in terms of all the current content that is out, including the quality time dating stuff, I've done all of that. And I'm here to just answer one very basic question, which is, has 1.4 managed to revive interest in Zenless? Has it managed to save it from irrelevancy? Has it managed to make it not shit? And the answer to that is probably. As you can see here, the interest for Zenless Zone Zero has jumped pretty significantly. It's not like the biggest jump of all time, but this is the most interest that Zenless Zero has had since 1.1. Which had like an interest rating of 19, but it was basically living off of the hype of launch. And as you can see, the increase from 16 to 19 is not that big. That was basically the cavern, the cave, the low point, and then it just increased by 3 points to 19. Whereas for 1.4, it went from 7 to 16, which is more than a double increase. So obviously, this is the most increase in interest in Zenless since the launch of the game. So that's very good. And you can see it over here as well on Sensor Tower, which counts the revenue. Well, at least it doesn't count the revenue, but it ranks the games as well as other apps in terms of how much revenue they have. And in South Korea, this game actually managed to get to #1 for top grossing apps for one day before it dropped to the second place today. And getting to the first place for South Korea, I believe, is a first. I don't think it ever got to #1 ever. In the history of Zenless Zone Zero, not during launch, not during Julian's banner when it was at #2, I believe, and then Ellen Jo was also at #2. China as well, it got to #2 on the first day, and it has remained at #2 for the second day, which is pretty significant because Ellen Jo actually never managed to get to #2. I think she was at #3 during launch. So this is the first time this has happened. Actually, I'm not sure. I think Julian might have gotten to #2. I'm not sure. But #2 is still very good because all the other banners since Julian, I believe, and Qingyi have not done that great. So it's good that they managed to revive interest in the game this late into its patch cycle, right? Because we're going to probably get number 1.5, patch number 1.5, which is probably going to be a filler patch, and then going to be 1.6, which is going to be also another filler patch. As far as Hoyoverse games goes, they tend to go to 1.6 for the first version patch cycle, and then we go directly to 2.0. That's usually how it goes. They've changed things up a bit since Honkai Star Rail came out. Honkai Star Rail is only going to 2.7, and then we're going to 3.0. I didn't believe that at first because of Genshin Impact and experience, but that is not going to be the case. We're not going to go to 2.8 for Honkai Star Rail. We're going directly from 2.7 to 3.0, so that makes me think maybe we'll go from 1.5 in Zenless directly to 2.0. Who knows? Maybe they'll take a page from Wuthering Waves. They basically copied Inferno Rider for Pompeii, not to say that copying is bad or anything, but it's very similar. So in China, this game is doing very well, at least for 1.4. In Japan, of course, this game is very popular. And if it weren't for Pokemon TCG Pocket, which is basically just a cheat for infinite income, it should be at #1 if it weren't for Pokemon TCG. It's at #2 now. So it's doing very, very well. This game is popping off in 1.4. I don't know if this is going to last. I don't know what this means for the overall trajectory of the game, but it does seem that with 1.4, people are very hype about Hoshimi Miyabi, which is like, you could put it down to the fact that Hoshimi Miyabi is insanely cracked. Like, I've seen a lot of people say, not a lot of people, but my impression was that Hoshimi Miyabi would be kind of like the Akron of Zenless Zone Zero because she's like an anomaly unit, which is kind of like a DOT, the dot damage of Zenless, but it's not really because Hoshimi Miyabi doesn't really need a team. She's so strong, you can basically just auto attack with her, like just left click, left click. As I've soon realized after getting her weapon, you basically just need to left click with her to win. Like there's nothing else you really need to do. Until the 2.0 content, I don't think there is going to be any content. Even like, I would suspect that even anti-ice enemies would probably just die if you just left click enough. So Hoshimi Miyabi is another tier of just broken. It's actually insane. I don't think there has ever been any character as broken as Hoshimi Miyabi since Genshin Impact launch. I don't think Akron is that much of a power creep compared to Miyabi. I don't think Dan Hunt in Barbara Lune was. I don't think any character, not even Firefly. This character is just like, she's not only broken. She's also extremely easy to play, and you don't really need teammates. Like, teammates are kind of like they're almost like a nice to have. You can have teammates, but you don't need them. So that's basically my thoughts in terms of whether or not Zenless Zone Zero has succeeded in making this game popular again. People seem to be pretty hype about the main story, although I do have my concerns about it that I want to talk about in another video. But overall, I thought the main story for 1.4 was at the very least an 8 out of 10. It has done well in the places that Zenless Zone Zero has traditionally done well. The cutscenes are absolutely amazing. The hype moments are absolutely the most hype out of any gacha game I've ever played, and I don't want to hear people saying that, you know, Genshin Impact or Wuthering Waves or Honkai Star Rail does this or that better. No, in terms of cutscenes, it doesn't do anything better than Zenless. Zenless is absolutely the top tier in terms of cutscenes. It's absolutely the top tier in terms of animations. It is the top tier in terms of not having a yacht fest go on for like 2 hours. And that is what Zenless Zone Zero has continued to do well in 1.4. However, I do wish, I made a community post about this a while ago. Not a while ago, it's literally just yesterday. I'm just gonna read what I said here in terms of the story. No, not this. I finished all main content in Zenless Zone Zero. This patch is a banger, definitely solidified it as my favorite Hoyo game right now, which is the truth. Wish the story took more time to develop some of the characters and let the moments hang for a bit longer, which was what I was thinking about Hoshimi Miyabi. I said I was going to make another video about this, but I might as well just talk about some of my concerns here if you're still watching this. I think that they should have took more time to develop Hoshimi Miyabi as a character. I don't think 4.5 was enough. It seems like for Zenless Zone Zero, they basically take 1.5 patch to develop every single character. You basically get half of a patch or like the epilogue of a patch for one patch to develop the character for the next patch. And then in the next patch, that character gets the majority of the screen time. And so every single character seems to have only one main patch as like a development cycle, which is not out of this world, which is not any different from most other gacha games, let's be honest. Like, Aventurine basically got only one patch, and then he was a side bit character for the rest of Penacony, which is actually not a good thing. That was also one of my complaints about Penacony's story, that every single patch felt like it was like a monster of the week. And Zenless Zone Zero is starting to feel a bit like that. I don't think Bringer was developed nearly enough. He had a relationship with Julian, or at least it was implied that he had some kind of like relationship with Julian, and that was not developed nearly as well as I thought it should. Hoshimi Miyabi, I can see her getting more screen time in the future, so I'm not like doomering right now about her place in the story. I think there's going to be more stuff in the future about her sword and how she has to face the destiny or fate as a Hoshimi. But my suspicion is also that it's going to be a side plot kind of thing. Like, it's going to be fit into some other character's plot line because they have to sell another new character. So again, Zenless Zone Zero feels like it's suffering from something that is similar to Honkai Star Rail at this point, which is that they're only releasing 5 new characters. Not only releasing, they are always releasing 2 5-star characters or 2 S ranks every single patch. And they just don't have enough time to develop all of those characters. Harumasa absolutely, maybe they should have cut him out and put him into a future patch and given his content, or at least the resources that were put into his content, into Hoshimi Miyabi instead, and made her a more fleshed out character. But again, this all has to do with revenue, right? There's really nothing I can do if they just insist we have to have 2 new S ranks, 2 new 5 stars every single patch. The only time they have ever not done that at Honkai Star was with, I think Rekka, yeah, Rappa. I don't know why I said Rekka, but Rappa is the only time that we have only gotten 1 new 5-star in Honkai Star Rail ever for 1 patch. And I think they need to do that more often for Honkai Star Rail to not feel like like all of the characters are undeveloped, or they only get 1 patch to develop. Or at least if they only get 1 patch to develop, they should be the only character that gets that 1 patch to develop, not have to share with another character. Zenless Zone Zero at this point, as good as they have done in terms of making the characters relevant, I feel like they are one of the better games, really, even for just non-gacha games that always puts older characters into new content, right? This patch was a prime example of that. They had this Avengers Assemble moment, but even then, I felt like they should have done more with the Avengers Assemble moment. One of the things that ticked me off was that the English voice acting was not there for some of the characters, which really took away from that moment. The other problem is, even if there was English voice acting, I feel like the Avengers moment should have had the characters actually fight Bringer, right? That was actually the case for some of the characters, right, in the previous patch with the Sons of Caladan. All of them were fighting against Pompey, right? And in this patch, I felt like they should have done that for all the characters. Nicole should have gone a hit in. She should have shot her black hole into them. Lycon should have done his rocket leg kick against Bringer. Caesar should have slammed her shield into Bringer's eyeball or something. And they should have all contributed. But instead, they just kind of posed around for a bit. And then they went off into La La Land, whereas Section 6 did all the fighting, at least canonically. And that is just another minor nitpick. Overall, I still thought it was good, but it feels like they ran out of budget. It feels like, my suspicion is that they just put too much effort and too much resources into developing the side stuff, the stuff that was meant to make people interested in the game from early on. This is the only time they have ever reworked older content, if believe it or not. This is the only time they have ever reworked older content for a gacha game that Hoyoverse released. For the older content Genshin, dude, I went back and played it, and it just feels some of that stuff just feels so outdated. They still have not given us the ability to farm materials, to level up characters, unless you go to the new region, which you can do with a teleport point. But it kind of spoils the story, doesn't it? So that always felt odd to me. And Zenless Zone Zero, they don't do that. They actually just make it easier. They give you access to the new bosses before you even fight the bosses. I actually looked at the Notorious Hunt section, and it just listed Bringer as the new boss. I'm like, what the fuck? They just spoiled the whole fucking story. Even if you didn't watch the trailer and live stream, which you can definitely do you can definitely avoid spoiling yourself. They just put that shit in there, and you can fight Bringer immediately, I believe. So it's just so. They make quality of life kind of like a mantra that they follow to a T. But sometimes maybe you just want a little bit less of that. Maybe just blur out, maybe making an option that you can blur out the bosses that you haven't fought before. Yeah. So I don't know why they have a hype moment and the screen just immediately cuts half a second later. This is another thing that really bothers me about Zenless Zone Zero's story, which is sometimes they have cutscenes that end on a very hype moment, and I feel like they should have just hang on to that moment for like 3 or 4 seconds longer. Give us a scene, a panorama shot of all of the characters like in their hype poses, and then just let us look at them for a bit. And they don't do that. And it's the same with all of these text messages that you see on a black screen. We can't read that shit in 2 seconds. That has always been a problem in Hoyoverse games, in Genshin Impact and Honkai Star and Zenless Zone Zero. Why the fuck do they do that? And then in other scenes with the black background and the white text, it'll hang on to that for like 10 to 15 seconds. There is no rhyme or reason to it. It just feels like they don't give a fuck. And this has nothing to do with Zenless Zone Zero anymore. I'm just ranting at this point. But overall, Zenless Zone Zero again has continued to do well at what it has always done, which is hype moments, hype cutscenes, minimum amount of yap, gets the point across very fast, even though sometimes it feels like it's a bit disconnected without the new Bangbu mode. It's also kind of weird that they introduced the new Bangbu system, the 3D Bangbu adventure system or the Fall Guy system, whatever you want to call it. It's not in the new content. So I feel like maybe they only have it for the older content, which is a really big shame in my opinion. They should also have it for the new content, or else it feels like in the new story, after Hoshimi Miyabi went through her dreamlike state, her hallucination state, it feels like the story just like went off into like the middle of nowhere. We went completely from one place to another place. We went from Hoshimi Miyabi going to Bringer being on the run, and all of that stuff in between was told to us in the form of a message or a dialogue that was unvoiced between you and Zhu and Qingyi. And I think that was the entire section between the Hoshimi Miyabi hallucination scene and us going to fight Bringer. And it just doesn't feel as connected as it should be. So give us unlike the other Hoyoverse games, give us more context. Give us more info about what is happening instead of less. Just a little bit more, not enough so that we feel bored out of our minds, but not as little as we have right now, and do it in a more visceral way. Give us more cutscenes, even if it's just like a really boring cutscene with very little animation. Not every single hype cutscene has to be like the balls to the walls, the most hype, the most animated characters of all time. I feel like I'm the guy who is arguing for the fact that Zenless Zone Zero is over animated. I'm not saying that, although I'm saying something very similar. I'm saying you should have cutscenes that just serve another purpose, and because they serve another purpose, that's also like, I think that is reason enough for them to have cutscenes, not for the sake of making it as hype as possible, which is the case for all of the cutscenes so far, but to have those cutscenes solely to transition us from one scene to another scene, if that makes any sense. Anyways, this is Benchgamer signing out. I almost forgot what the original purpose of this video was. Oh yeah, Zenless Zone Zero. Yeah, people seem to like it a lot more now. But is it enough to last until 2.0? What are they even going to add in 2.0? That is what I'm questioning. Are they going to add a new region? Because technically speaking, isn't New Eridu supposed to be the only city left in the entire world? I'm really, really interested in what they're going to do to one-up 1.4 for 2.0. If this is not like the biggest patch of all time, then what is 2.0 going to be looking like? Are they going to have less content than 1.4? I find that hard to believe. And it would be very underwhelming if that was actually true. So this is Benchgamer signing out. Hope you guys enjoyed me ranting about Zenless Zone Zero. This remains to this day. Well, it's actually not been that long, but this remains to this day, from the release of Zenless Zone Zero to until now. This remains the best Hoyoverse game in my opinion thus far. Benchgamer signing out for real this time. Bye bye.